I'm sure by now you have seen the meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump that turned into a complete disaster. And I think a big reason it turned out so badly was because President Zelensky's English just isn't good enough. Now, could President Zelensky go into a cafe and order a coffee with his English? Of course. And that way, it's really good. But when it comes to a meeting where we are talking about billions of dollars and millions of lives that could be affected, well, let's just say I wish they would have used translators. That way, their messages would have been more clear and the conversation would have been a little slower. In today's English lesson, we are going to talk about some of that confusion, like the word suit in English. We will talk about the difference between fatigues and fatigue. We will talk about nuances and some of the nuances we have in English, like the difference between house and home. We will talk about the English phrasal verb kissing up and the English phrasal verb talking over. We will take a look at some of the clips of that meeting and what could have been done differently. If that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and hit that like button and let's watch the first clip from that interview.
Why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest, why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if do you own a suit?
Yeah, problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting the dignity of this office.
I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
Okay.
Yes, maybe one.
Maybe something
like yours. Yes.
That'd be great.
Maybe something better. I don't know. We will see. Maybe something cheaper than. Yeah. Thank you.
The first thing we should mention is that obviously President Zelensky's first language is not English. Ukrainian isn't even his first language because he grew up in a time where Russian was probably the first language in Ukraine. I think it's safe to say Russian is his first language. A reporter asked President Zelensky about the way he was dressed. And to answer that question, he said, "I will wear a suit or a costume when the war is over." If we look at the translation of suit into Russian or Ukrainian, now Ukrainian and Russian are not the same language, but they do share many of the same words. In Russian, suit is costume or something like that. But in English, costume is a little bit different, or should I say quite a bit different. And this is just one of the many ways each man might have thought wrong about the other person. Costume in English means clothing worn to look like someone or something else, usually for a special event or performance. Like in the United States, we have a holiday called Halloween where people dress up. That maybe is a new English phrasal verb for you, but they put on a costume to look different. Let's look at a sentence that uses both Halloween and costume. For Halloween, she wore a witch costume with a black hat and a broom. Some may have felt not wearing a suit in the Oval Office was disrespectful. Now, I don't think President Trump did because Trump said several times that he liked the way Zelensky was dressed.
Yes, I had 20 clothes. How are you? Pretty sure. He's all dressed up today.
President Trump, what's your message to Vladimir Putin, sir?
We also need to talk about one of President Trump's heroes, Winston Churchill. He was the Prime Minister of England during World War II, and he often wore fatigues because his country was at war. So just in case you don't know that word, fatigues, let's talk about fatigues, and then we will talk about fatigue, which is very different. English can be a very confusing language. Fatigues, clothing worn by soldiers, usually a camouflage uniform for work or battle. If something is camouflaged, you really can't see it in the woods. It kind of blends in. It makes the soldier disappear. Let's look at a sentence using fatigues. The soldiers wore fatigues during their training exercises in the forest. But fatigue has a very different meaning. It means extreme tiredness or exhaustion. After working for 10 hours without a break, she felt deep fatigue and needed to rest. President Trump even has a small statue, or we might call it a bust, of Winston Churchill in the Oval Office. Another way that Zelensky used English, which might have upset President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, we will get to him in a minute, is when Zelensky used feel when talking about the future.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not
You
have
gotta-
the war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in
answering
no
on
position
this
to
question.
dictate that.
That's exactly
Remember
what
that.
you're
Not
You're in
dictate.
no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
You
We're going to feel very
you will
good.
feel influenced.
We're going to feel
I'm-
very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influenced.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself to be in a
from
very
the very
bad position,
beginning
and he
of the
happens
war.
to be right about
From the
it.
very beginning of the war.
You're not in a
Mr.
good
Brown,
position.
I was
President Zelensky talked about a big ocean in between Russia and the United States, and he said, "You will feel it in the future." And Trump said, "Don't tell us what we're going to feel." So just that little word feel might have made President Trump a little more defensive, because feel can also be like you are going to experience something. President Trump may have thought President Zelensky was trying to make him feel scared or worried. Just don't think President Zelensky had the nuance to convey his message a little bit better. Instead, he probably wanted to say something like, Putin is not going to stop. First, he attacks us, and then eventually he will attack you if he isn't stopped. But with limited English, that's a difficult thing to say. Again, which is why I wish they would have used translators. It might have stopped the argument from getting worse. President Zelensky did an interview with Fox News, and there he had a translator. It might have made a difference during that interview because the interviewer, Brett Baer, said a word Zelensky didn't understand. He asked his translator, and the problem was quickly solved.
Last thing, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Do you think your relationship with Donald Trump, President Trump, after today, can be salvaged?
Can be. Huh? Yes, of course, because it's relations more than two presidents. It's the historical relations, strong relations between our people.
But let's talk about that term nuance. It means a small difference in meaning, sound, or feeling that is not easy to notice. For example, the word home and house have a nuance in meaning. Home feels warmer and personal. House is just the building, but a home is how you make it feel. Maybe you put up decorations. Maybe you put down a rug to cover the hard floor. Now, the next thing I talk about will have less to do with language and more about culture. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but Americans and Canadians often will say sorry, even when it's not our fault. If somebody has a friend who has lost a parent, that friend might say, "Oh, I am sorry for your loss." They didn't kill that parent. They are just sorry that the person is feeling that way. A lot of times when Americans say sorry, they are not taking responsibility. It's more like, "I'm sorry you are feeling the way you are feeling." And we will often go out of our way to say thank you. I don't think that is the same way in Ukraine or Russia or in other Slavic countries. I'm not saying one is better than the other, it's just a different way of living. At one time during the meeting, Vance says, "Have you ever once offered thanks?"
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today,
have you said thank
even
you?
today.
And here we can get into a little bit of how President Trump likes to be treated. Let's practice some reading down below. Americans and Canadians often say sorry for things that aren't their fault. We often say thank you to be polite. And Vice President Vance was talking about saying thank you to President Trump, even though it's not his money, it's the American taxpayers' money. But sometimes I think Trump likes to feel important, and the people around him want to make him feel important. Let's talk more about being polite. In Ukraine, it is very common to say, "Hey, can I have a coffee?" It's not rude, but in the US, it might be a little rude. In the US, we might say more things like, "Oh, sorry to bother you, but can I trouble you for a cup of coffee?" Even though it's their job to serve coffee, Americans, some Americans, not all, go out of our way to be extra polite. Americans smile when passing by strangers on the street. I don't think that is often done in Slavic countries like Poland. I was there last summer. I think it might have been weird if I smiled at people passing by on the street. Please, if you are from Russia or Ukraine or Poland, is it weird if you smile at somebody you don't know on the street? Maybe the way President Zelensky was crossing his arms, some people in the room thought that was rude. In the United States, it might be rude. In Ukraine, it might not be rude. Let's talk about the English phrasal verb kiss up. President Trump loves it when people kiss up to him. Vice President J.D. Vance. Notice how I said Vice President J.D. Vance. Once during the meeting, President Zelensky called Vice President J.D. Vance simply J.D. Now, that could be rude also.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
If you notice, President Trump will often call Vice President J.D. Vance just simply J.D. I don't know. That could have been a problem. A lot of the things I say in this English lesson is just my opinion. But let's read the sentence below. Vice President J.D. Vance said to Zelensky, or President Zelensky, that he should say thank you to President Trump. Maybe he should say the American people. It's not Trump's money. But who knows? If I am sharing my opinion, I don't think President Zelensky had to say thank you in that meeting to President Trump. But like I was saying earlier, President Trump loves it when people kiss up to him. Let's get the official definition for kiss up. Trying to please someone, especially a boss or a teacher to get their favor. Maybe you want them to give you things, so you are being nice. Take a look at that picture there. It looks like a student is giving his teacher an apple. Let's look at a sentence. Jake keeps kissing up to the teacher by bringing an apple every morning. Maybe he thinks he is going to get a better grade if he brings her an apple.
But if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
So let's look at something that Vice President J.D. Vance says. He says, Mr. President, with all due respect. And he actually interrupts the president of another nation. That, I think, is quite rude. But of course, J.D. Vance's first language is English, so he has an easier time being polite or seeming to be polite in English. By saying that, it's a polite way to disagree in English. And the vice president interrupts President Zelensky quite often. Trump also interrupts. And I'm pretty sure no matter what culture you come from, interrupting is seen as rude. I felt really bad when President Trump started talking about playing cards. It's a metaphor. Metaphors are very difficult to understand if you don't speak the language. Trump says, you don't have the cards right now. Of course, I don't know what President Zelensky was thinking, but he says, I'm not playing cards. I'm very serious. So he might have thought that President Trump was saying like he was playing games. This is a serious situation for your people. So I think it was just something that was lost in translation, unfortunately.
You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
Maybe Zelensky thought Trump was saying that he wasn't being serious or something like that. Trump and Vance were often talking at the same time and talking over Zelensky. You know, it's very difficult to have a conversation one-on-one in English if English isn't your first language. I can't imagine how hard it is to understand if two people are talking at you and talking over you. So let's get the official definition for the English phrasal verb talking over. It means speaking while someone else is talking, not letting them finish. Let's use talking over in a sentence. During the meeting, Trump and Vance kept talking over the Ukrainian president, so Zelensky could not share his ideas. I hope this English lesson was helpful for you. I hope this whole mess can be fixed very soon. There are a lot of people dying in Ukraine and it needs to stop. If you're looking for more English with Trump and Vance and Zelensky, right down there is another English lesson I did. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.